All right, this has been, I think, a great start. And I had a couple of questions, and they're not really for any of the artists. They're for all of them, or whoever wants to take them. And as usual, I've given them all preparatory questions so they can be prepared. And my first question is not one that's on the preparatory sheet. But it's something that it occurred to me listening to the four of you now. You know, there's a way in which the New Orleans, having a biennial in New Orleans isn't like having a biennial somewhere else. And in the times that you've been there and thinking about the show, what are your thoughts about the particular responsibilities that I think that would be incumbent on us as people from the art world to bring to a situation like that in New Orleans? You know, I think it has such an important tradition and history, and it has such a singular culture, but at the same time it's still struggling, I think, to completely get back on its feet. How do you work with those thoughts when you're coming up with those ideas? Because I see that there's a feeling of wanting to take responsibility reflected in each of your projects.
I wanted to answer one quote. When I was looking at all your questions, I went through all my sketchbooks and found this quote that I think tries to deal with the question, which I think is the biggest one, really. It's Anine, thank you. And he was talking about hope, and he was talking about the core, but I think it really relates to what we're trying to do. And he said the core are core in many different ways, and one of those ways is that they lack stories, concrete stories that can inspire hope. He argues that art can create these stories, both in the making of the story and in the story of how the artwork got made. He says that hope cannot be built around abstraction, and that art makes hope concrete, that it increases the archive if possible. So, I don't know, I kind of think of Prospect.1 as a calling or a challenge, and I think it really asks us what art can do. And, you know, I'm the first one to try to argue about the power of art. But I think when you look at, you know, the trauma of New Orleans, it's a really tall order. And one can get pretty discouraged even in one's most ideal state. But there's something else he said. And he said, and this helps me all the time in life as in making art, but he said that we need to think of the biggest problem in the world and come up with the smallest contribution towards their solution. And I love the sentiment in that, and I also love the feeling.
That's a hard one, I guess, for me, because, like, you know, I'm not a resident of New Orleans. I want to come. I've been in New York for 26 years. But I think, you know, I like very much what Jane said, and I think she's sort of saying this differently too, but it's sort of it's a fine line between generalizing too much about the specific situation that's occurred there, and then treating it too specifically, literally also, which is, I think, so it's necessary to generalize, but to be very specific and articulate within those generalities, because no one wants to say that this tragedy is better than others, for instance. It's just it's part of a general situation, and I think it's important to, however directly or adaptively or politically address that, to bring that out in a point.
I mean, I would say that, speaking personally to that question, one of the big problems is that you want people to be aware of what happened, and you want people to be conscious and be sensitive. But at the same time, you also want to celebrate the beauty that New Orleans really has, and that it is always conveyed. And I think sometimes people are surprised when they hear that many of the artists, maybe most of the artists, are making works that aren't necessarily a direct response to Katrina or reference to Katrina, but simply are works of art made for the city of New Orleans now,
propose art as a medium in which to think these things.
I guess the thing that I was thinking about is when we were there is that the second line when we got involved. And I really was thinking about analyzing that experience in the second line and how people really. I felt like a spectator because there was another level of involvement where people were really in it and we were in the moment. Then there's the key thing, this idea of being inside a moment where you can lose yourself and kind of reflect on something bigger. And I feel like that's the possibility of those kind of events happening over and over for somebody where they go through an exhibition and they can really get trapped in this affecting presence of the work and then somehow get back out of themselves and see something else. I think that's a strong potential of that experience.
I mean, for me, I think one of the most intriguing and powerful aspects of how we've gone about this is that we encouraged us to go and react to something and to travel and to find a home for the work. And what it says to me is that it's going to force people to go to places in New Orleans that normally they wouldn't, or normally they wouldn't, and look at things from the sort of the lens of this particular kinds of works and installation and so forth. So I don't know exactly what the function is of biennials in the larger sense, but I think when we create a large show that makes people beyond there, I think it's a really powerful thing to mix. Even people more than that to visit the things that they consider sort of, it's past. We watched this amazing play when we were out there, forgetting the title of it. It was sort of a piece in progress. It was a mishmash of dance and testimonials from folks who had been, or actors actually, who were portraying the stories of people who were present at the time and very much affected by the flood and by the hurricane and other things. It was incredibly, probably very discombobulated time to set up. But it was interesting to hear the discussion we had afterwards because a lot of the folks we met on, the local folks we met with, were kind of the city that puts on it. We're done with this kind of thing. And I remember thinking, you're probably done with it because of the altitude that you live at. You probably live somewhere higher up than the lower ninth ward. So I think what this biennial is going to do is going to force people here to walk in the world and say, we're not in the world, we're just not in the house. Force people to actually investigate this through movement, which I think is amazing.
I just want to say one more thing. I think it's important. Most people who go to New Orleans go there to have a good time. And I think the people who go to this biennial should have a good time, but I think also the people there want their situation to be taken very seriously, obviously. And so I think it's as a sort of tourist event, it's different than what New Orleans is used to, and I think that's just wonderful in the city.
Well, I'm going to say something. It's not a question, it's more of a comment, but I don't want to veer too much into being a tourism commercial. But I do want to note that something you said, Wangechi, really stands out for me, that artists who come to New Orleans who've come in the last year to make their site visits, and they're coming from all over the world, not just from different parts of the United States, they all seem to be struck by how alive the city is and how dynamic the local culture is, how much New Orleanians love being New Orleanians, that they love doing what New Orleanians do together now, but more than ever. And I think that comes as a surprise to people because of the way New Orleans has been portrayed in the media. It's very hard to understand a city that has suffered enormous trauma, and at the same time is insisting that the party will keep rolling. And I think that this kind of contrast is something that people are really struck about when they come to town, because they think that they're going to see a town where everyone's depressed. But if they are depressed, and I'm not saying they're not, they go to extraordinary lengths to turn that depression into something completely different. Well, we've been talking for a little over an hour, and I know there's some of you who have some questions you'd like to ask to members of the panel. I also want to point out that there's at least one other Prospect.1 artist who's in the audience with us right now, Paul Walensky. He's in the room, and I don't know, is anyone else here who I'm not spotting? All right, so if you have a question for anyone who's participating in the show, please do. We have a microphone right up here, and it's on, and all you have to do is come up to the mic and grab it, and you can have a first taker or
maybe you should just talk loud. Oh, sorry. Well, what I'm really interested in is how rich the first question that you asked, Dan, actually is. I mean, I was writing down a lot in my notebook the word humility and the word responsibility, and what I don't think was really addressed is the structure of this. I mean, I know that there are able artists, and I know that, and I know that there are only 4 here, but it looks like 4 people came to New Orleans and looked at the place, and they're from far away, and then they have to say something about it. They have to comment as individuals. You know, that's a very interesting structure. And it makes it kind of like interpretive social anthropology in a weird way, you know, and I think that that's rich and problematic, and it gives all 4 of you so much more than responsibility, you know. I mean, you have this. Have you guys thought about that? Like how much more. You have to think your individual selves and then make art about something that is not about you necessarily. And that seems like such an interesting result that you have to bridge. And I don't know exactly how to put words to that, but that seems really spooky to me. Is anybody thought about that on the panel? Sorry.
No,
maybe scary is the word, but
yeah.
Yeah, I think that's part of, if it wasn't Dan, I probably wouldn't be here. And I think, you know, because especially if you're trying to talk about process and being in the process, and I think that's the thing that, even while I'm here, the piece is changing, you know what I mean, that kind of thing, so it's precarious. But I think in terms of, you know, what one would think about in terms of what the ideas we're trying to present. I think it's a combination, at least for me, it's a combination of some path of my work that I've been going in to think about. This strange moment not wanting to work with discarded things. I found that for me that was really odd. That I didn't have any desire for some reason to work with that. Because there's so much there, and to have another kind of search and challenge. So the experience of working with it is going to be, I think, a real turning point in my work. I can see that already. It's pushing me in an area that I have no idea what's going to happen.
I'm sorry, is that because of the changes in your
I think for me, it has to do with maybe a resistance to the context of stuff being around, of this waste that everyone think that would be a perfect thing for Nari to be doing, you know, that's all that discarded material. So I think this is about trying to enter the dialogue into the place, into the site in a different way. of the things that I left there with is this feeling that something needs to be done. And that was why I actually did this motion of activism. And then I referenced something for myself in my neighborhood that seemed to be heading that positive or headed in that direction, which was Al Sharpton's election, figuring how that same juxtaposition of the gender situation, how can that be moved into another kind of context as well?
Yeah.
I'm going to go back and just, because we talk about what just happened in Kenya recently, because one of the questions that kept coming up from people was, first of all, is your family okay? What's happened? How did this possibly happen in a country that's supposed to have this reputation of peace and stability and so forth? And what happened in Kenya is very similar in a very different way to what happened when Katrina happened, which is that the cat was let out, the secrets were out, All of the stuff that has been brewing, all of the energy and the resentment and the hostility, and also pretty much, this frustration with poverty is what was let out when the elections were rigged. And Katrina wasn't very much a scam remover. It gave us an opportunity to go, this is not them, this is us, this is not, and this is actually what's going on right now everywhere, except that we're not probably going to have a natural, disaster everywhere to prove it. But I don't think this bio inspires responsibility in just artists. I think in almost anybody who tries to dig and understand what happened, I think you're called upon to sort of think about it, invest yourself somehow in how did I play a role in this? How did we end up with this buffoon for 8 years and a government that is willing to let this happen in the richest country in the world? So I think that kind of thinking was what happened to me when I was there, and it also came down to such a beautiful level where I met people who, as Dan said, were existing in this very human, very empathetic, very compassionate way. There wasn't that rage and madness that perhaps one would expect when you've been neglected by the state. So for me, it was very easy as we walked into something that was laid out, and this is what happened, and this is what we can choose to do.
I guess I want to say that for an artist who actually lives in New Orleans or went through the recent hurricane, to make an artwork about this or there, wouldn't be necessarily a more valid statement. It would be just a very different statement. And then I think what happened in New Orleans was shared differently by many people all over the place. This show is the first to address that. The media has not addressed it that way particularly, or is unable to. And so I think that this makes Prospect.1 very unique, in that there are artists who are very intimate with the city and others who are just going there for the first time.
I've been asking the question for years in many different situations, and I think it's an impossible problem. And I think Dan is insane. I mean, to try to create this thing in such a short time with so many artists. And we love that he's insane, and so are we. And I feel like, there is one thing that I noticed in New Orleans is that everybody has this idea of what the best way to help is. But the important thing is that we all do whatever we can do in our own way. And as artists, this is what we do from a very personal place. We respond humanly, and we put it out there, and it resonates or it doesn't. And that's what we have to offer.
I'm going to try to take a crack at it myself. I feel when I've done other biennials, one of the kind of unspoken rules is that more or less 10% of the show should be local. So 10, 12, 15%, that you need to get it right. You need to get a certain core group of local art. and that is what kind of almost leverages a lot of what's coming in and being imported and kind of balances it off. And I was struck by the fact that when we sat down and looked at the 10 or so artists from Louisiana who are participating, that the number of artists who are making work about Katrina, about the devastation, about New Orleans post-decay, is roughly equal to the number of artists internationally and nationally. There's always a number of artists who believe that the best thing to do is to make something very beautiful and transcendentally beautiful and try to lift everybody out of the rut, let's say. And then you have artists who find that the best thing to do is to create a situation that points to something else. That's a narrative or a representation of the situation as they see it. And then a whole lot of artists who fall sort of halfway in between. My feeling when I started to put the shape of the exhibition together was that Prospect.1 would only be part of a much larger phenomenon that would start to happen. And we planted the seeds very early on throughout the art community by saying to people, you know, look, at the most we're going to have 10 Louisiana artists represented in the show. So please don't look at Prospect.1 as something that's going to kind of come in and scoop you all up and say, okay, here's your bread and butter now for the foreseeable future. What it's going to do, however, is get the attention, we hope, for perhaps a brief time, but for a certain window of time. And if you as an artist want to have your work seen, maybe that's the right moment to go and do something. And what we're finding now is there are about a dozen, probably 15. We estimate by the time we open it will be between 30 and 40 satellite exhibitions, parallel exhibitions that are taking place all over the city. And in fact, I just heard that Joe Mitchell Foundation is actually giving grants to some artists in Louisiana, in the New Orleans community, who are making new projects for these satellite exhibitions. So some of the idea that the whole world, that the entire art community in New Orleans can be energized in this way by the fact that tens of thousands of people from all over the world may be coming to New Orleans for visual arts purposes. I mean, obviously, there's something else going on as well, you know, the humanitarian dimension of it. But the idea that the city could actually be not just recognized, but actually boosted and uplifted in some way, including economically, through contemporary art. I think that's a very important statement to be making right now in the U.S. art world. Because I think for many of us, the notion that the only thing that ever gets reference about art are auction prices these days. And it seems like everything we do and everything we're about is reduced to money. And for me, it became a very important statement to make, and I think it was maybe a presumptuous one, but I think it was a very good time to say to the art world, you know what? It's not about money. Art is really about other values. And here's this community. And this community... Thank you. And then here's this community that could really benefit by art, through art, that art can actually be a real stepping stone to getting to the next stage of rebuilding this community. And I think it's important for all of us to remember that, you know, what we do doesn't just consist of pushing our careers ahead the stage, but really about contributing to humankind through our vision. So, in a nutshell, that was kind of one of the looming feelings of responsibility I had. How do you do something that benefits the entire art community in New Orleans and continues to benefit over time? Confuse me, please, because it really works.
I mean, just to clear from my own position, I don't want to just be an asshole clear, you know, like apologizing something, you know, like something that is imperfect and is impossible. You're absolutely right, you know, and that's okay, you know. I mean, I guess I just think it's so interesting that the only way that 81 people and, you know, and a bunch of curators, and, you know, can attack this is a bunch of individuals who are actually very small. And I think that that's actually very interesting, that you can't do anything bigger than what you think of with your own mind. That's all. Yeah, so good. Thanks.
You know, also there's this big migration to New Orleans that's still occurring. A lot of young people, there's a lot of young people, men and women in their 20s say, moved to New Orleans because of what happened there. There's been this kind of like migration, like people want to go there. It's kind of amazing on levels of life that's occurred. It's awful, but you know, it's these lives, like a diaspora on a minor scale. And I think that this shows part of that. It will sort of pan out and sort of dissolve into that general situation in a very interesting way. And it's unlike maybe other millennials in other cities. It's going to resonate with people. And I think people in Orleans are really great things happening too.
Another question? We have one. Come on.
Hi, I just wanted to say this is really exciting what you all are doing. I think it's fantastic. And adding on to what we've been discussing, I'm just curious, this is, I guess, directed towards Dan. How are you working with the community to get them excited about this, and also bridging the gap between the art world, which can sometimes be seen as distant or maybe even elitist, and working with the community as a whole? I was just kind of curious how you're bridging the gap.
That's a great question. Up until now, we have a great PR marketing company. Some of whom are here. That's with us tonight. They're called Blue Media, and they've handled really our account exclusively for the last 14, 15 months, because we wanted to be sure that the art world knew what we were doing, that people in the art world who paid attention to things like biennials would find out about us, and if interested, would be able to get to the details and make the trip to New Orleans. What's become really clear in the last few months is that the way we present ourselves to people in New Orleans is also of fundamental importance. And even though there are, I would say, the vast majority of people connected to the art community, for example, know about it, we work very closely with public and governmental agencies, the Lieutenant Governor's Office, the City Council, institutions like the Downtown Development District, the New Orleans Tourism Marketing Corporation, the Convention and Visitors Bureau. These are all operations that are set up to really make sure that everyone in the tourism infrastructure is involved. We recently made a decision to start working with a local PR marketing company called EBO Networks, which is primarily directed to minority audiences. So it's a marketing firm that really specializes in kind of a more urban audience that really focuses on families, really like kind of youth and young adult groups. And they really believe that they're the perfect marketing tool for us because of their ability to really reach parts of New Orleans and parts of the community that the Times-Picayune or Gambit Weekly, which are the main periodicals, don't necessarily reach so effectively. So rather than kind of trying to go for let's say a more middle of the road or all-purpose big public relations and marketing firm, in the city that's kind of tailored to do what we're doing. We wanted to work with somebody that's much more specialized and able to look at aspects of the exhibition culturally and in terms of the heritage and really make connections to the community. Beyond that, a lot of our marketing is happening through volunteerism, strangely enough. We have experienced an incredible phenomenon, which Jacqueline could tell you about, but I'm still thrown by the sheer scale of it. So many people in New Orleans are coming to us and saying, what can we do to help? How can we be involved? Fortunately, some of these are people with money, so we can easily ask them. We can easily tell them what it is we really need. But for many of them, this idea of volunteerism and being able to be part of something that helps the city is a natural outgrowth of, I think, people seeing the results, the fruits of their volunteerism after Katrina. You know, almost 3 years on now, there are a lot of things about the city that are getting better. And a great proportion of that doesn't come from public efforts, it comes from private efforts, from communities and neighborhoods and people helping. And so this idea that Prospect New Orleans is in a way another manifestation of this volunteerism is, I think, going to wind up being one of the most appealing aspects of it to New Orleans, because that's one of the things that's spreading like wildfire. But there are other things that I could go into, but I think those are the main areas that we're trying to make sure that everyone in New Orleans. Well, wait, one of the reasons the exhibition is free, that we're not charging any admission for the exhibition, is also so that people in New Orleans feel like this is a gift to them. This is not something that they have to pay for. They've already been through a lot. We want to just hand this to them and say, here's a world-class biennial exhibition any city in the world would give their ITs for. Here it is, have fun, enjoy it. 2 years from now when we do Prospect 2, maybe we'll charge you a few bucks. But right now, it's all going to be free. And that could be the most effective marketing tool of all. Yes, yes.
When I walked in here and I looked at my BlackBerry, naturally, to see if there's anything important I had to answer. And I looked at Ms. Martin Sullivan, and she's sitting in the auction, and she's saying, well, what is everybody talking about there? I'm sitting here at this auction, and I have never seen this much money in my entire life. How can we help you to raise money for all the things that you're doing? Tell us, how can we, what besides giving, how can we help you to get money for this project? I think it's important.
Are you asking me to tell you how? Are you asking me to give me your BlackBerry? This is Nancy Portnoy, who's one of our board members and a very dear friend. Thank you, Nancy. She brings up an important point. We are a $3.5 million operation, and we are very, very much in active fundraising mode right now. We need to raise more than half of that $3.5 million over the next few months. So we have a fantastic fundraising operation. We have a lot of people who have already been incredibly generous to us. But if any of you know of anyone who would like to help or who might be interested in being involved, please take a Prospect.1 brochure with you. Talk to anyone who's got a green ribbon on, because they're a member of our staff, our very, very hardworking staff. Come visit us at our website or come talk to me immediately afterwards, because we have fantastic benefits for people that want to support us. But really, in order to make an exhibition like this free, it takes a lot of money, it takes a lot of generosity. So, in the spirit of what Nancy said, please think about people who would be able to make a meaningful gift to Prospect New Orleans, because I think it's going to be an important gift, not just to New Orleans, but to the U.S. world. Are there any questions? Yes.
Since much of the exhibition will be site-specific, can you tell us a little bit about it? It sounded so intriguing when each of you spoke about finding spaces and responding literally to the site and to the feeling and emotion of what the specific area gave to you. What will it be like for people traveling to New Orleans to experience the biennial itself? Our place is distant. You use the term of meandering, going through the city, and there's something very beguiling about that, and I think that seems to be a very important thing. So can you describe it a little more physically in terms of what the experience might be?
Sure, that's a great question. We'll have a shuttle. It's going to be operating every day of the exhibition. We'll be picking people up in the center of the city, in the downtown area. and taking them up to Tulane University, the uptown neighborhoods where there'll be a number of installations, both around Tulane and Loyola, and also in the Lower Garden District in the McKenna Museum of African American Art. The second main stop is around Lee Circle, which is where the CAC will have something like 25 artists moving up the third and fourth floors of the CAC for the first time in almost living memory. And a lot of artists will be showing there at the D-Day Museum, at the Ogden Museum of Southern Art, and at the Louisiana Artworks. And they're all very, very close to each other. There are a couple of sites in the downtown area, in more of the central business district, that are kind of sensitive development right now. But then you'll get back on your shuttle and you'll go to the Old US Mint, which is down in the French Quarter or Esplanade. It goes to the port, and that's a beautiful, beautiful space where about 18 artists will be showing their work. Nearby is the Historic New Orleans Collection, which has an extraordinary mid-19th century courtyard and private home that they're going to be devoting. And then the next stop on the bus would be Treme, which is one of the most important historic districts in the city, the African American Museum, the Jazz and Heritage Foundation's home site, and the funeral home nearby that they recently purchased will all be sites of the exhibition. And you'll get back on the bus and go to the St. Claude Arts District, which is kind of where the Bywater meets the 7th Ward. And there you'll see exhibitions at Universal Furniture Warehouse, probably at the Colson School, and at a little space in St. Roch called Home Gallery. And the last stop on the trip would be the second to last stop would be the Lower Ninth Ward, where you'll park at L9, which will be able to walk around and see the 7 or 8 exhibitions that are there. And I would say the final stop for a lot of people would be the New Orleans Museum of Art, which is the city's truly encyclopedic museum. And that's where about 5 or 6 artists are doing their installations. And from then, it's really kind of piecemeal throughout the city, trying to connect artists that just have spots of their own. And we'll let a lot of people do that on their own. But the shuttle will be bringing you around the whole time. And we think it's going to take a couple of days, really, to see the whole exhibition. And we hope it will stay a whole lot longer. But we're working very hard to make sure that you'll be connected, even if you're a Manhattan pedestrian. As I still am after a year of working in New Orleans, I still get almost everywhere on foot. I think I'm crazy, but we're not going to make you get around on foot. We'll make sure it's very, very easy for you to get from one place to the other.
When I was doing my site visit, I was fortunate enough to get a bicycle, which was a really great way to get around as well. Grassroots way to see the place.
There's a question.
It's really not a very important question, it's just about practical aspects. What you've just been talking about, because that's curious to me. I know New Orleans a little bit. And I'm wondering, because you mentioned something about not charging people in New Orleans, right? And it's been now altogether free, and the entrance is free for everybody but the tourists who will come, the people who will be getting on that shuttle.
It's free of charge.
It's altogether free across the board.
That's right.
For everybody.
For everybody.
But, it's just like, why wouldn't the people who come from the New Orleans area ever consider that they could be contributing to these people? New Orleans people don't have to pay because you're bringing them, that's the help. That's kind of like, for me, that's like donating money to them. That's what you're doing, that's great. But, there's going to be a lot of people who are interested in artwork, who have a lot of money, and why wouldn't they be able to afford to pay for these things? They should, I think, that'd be very helpful. And rather than just go into extra work for artists to do all this work for funding, why wouldn't the people who are outside of the city be not charged for that situation?
That's a good question. There was a time when we really considered a two-tiered admission policy. But I find that there's some ethical aspects of that that don't sit right with me. But more than anything else, I think I was really inspired by Sao Paulo, which I think is it's the truly great biennial in this hemisphere. And the last couple of editions, and maybe for longer, Sao Paulo doesn't charge And I think the idea that the Sao Paulo Biennial is owned by the people, even though it's not, but the fact that it has made such an important contribution to Brazilian art and giving younger Brazilian artists an opportunity to see their compatriots' work or their own generation's work in an international context. I think that experience repeated over time has been such a benefit to Brazilian art and to the world by implication, that I think it's not really a sacrifice to make. We will have many opportunities for people who are there from out of town to lighten their wallets while they're there. Believe me, there'll be subtle and not so subtle chances for people to make contributions. But I really felt that the notion that it's free, I think will also kind of make people drop their guard a little bit and feel much more kind of open to the sorts of interactions that happen beyond the art. Because New Orleans is kind of a living museum all of its own. Well, if you don't have any more questions, oh, we do have one more. Ms. Bergeron, I believe. Well, that would be great. Would you be willing? Paul Polinsky, who's here, is doing one of the most... Sure, we'll bring the mic over. We're going to give the mic just for a minute to Paul Polinsky, who's been doing... He's really being put on the spot right now.
Yeah, talk about it.
Why don't you stand up, Paul?
Thank you. I didn't press for this either. I'm very pleased to be part of the exhibition, and essentially what I'm doing is taking a 30-foot Gulfstream travel trailer, which is typical of the 169,000 trailers that were sent to the Gulf Coast as FEMA trailers, and I'm transforming it into a mobile artist studio, which would enable, in future disaster settings like this, it would enable an artist to go take up residence in an area that has no power grid. The trailer will be solar or wind powered. So it's kind of my response to having gradually studied the situation with these trailers, which was really an abomination. And I think Dan's idea is that we'll move the trailer around the city of New Orleans to several locations over the course of 11 weeks. Currently it's at Socrates Sculpture Park in an exhibition called Waste Not, Want Not, which is examining issues around recycling and adaptive reuse. So I will be building the trailer there from now until mid-October, and you're all welcome to come by and pick up a hammer or a saw, give me a hand with it, because it's a monumental project. But more than that, you're welcome just to stop by and see it if you're in Long Island City and would like to come by. So, thank you.
Well, on that note, I think it's been a very invigorating discussion. I hope all of you enjoyed it as much as we did. I really want to thank the core panelists on the dais with me, Anine, Jacqueline, Wangechi, and Nari. I want to thank the hardworking staff of US Biennial, Blue Medium, the Big Red Card, and Bergeron Associates. And I really want to thank all of you for joining us tonight and sharing this discussion about Prospect New Orleans. Thank you, and see you in New Orleans.